My granddaughter once asked me, "Grandma, when did you stop trusting your own child?" I told her, "On a Christmas morning. Sweet here. Tea." The day my daughter smiled too wide while handing me a cup of tea. I remember the steam first. It curled up in thin little ribbons, smelling faintly of chamomile and something else I could not name. My daughter Karen stood over me like a hostess on television, hands clasped, eyes bright, watching every tiny move I made as if I were about to open a surprise gift. "Here you go, Mom," she said. "I made this one special. Just the way you like it." Her voice was soft but her fingers twitched. She never cared about my tea. For years, she barely looked up from her phone when she visited. Yet that morning she was glowing, her gaze glued to my hands as I wrapped them around the mug. Please like this video and don't forget to subscribe my channel and listen to my story till the end. Richard, her husband, hovered by the kitchen counter, pretending to scroll his phone. Their son, my Tyler, sat at the table, picking at a muffin, eyes flicking between his parents and me with a nervousness I did not understand yet. Outside, the world looked peaceful. Snow resting on the neighbor's fence, the faint jingling of a bell from some distant decoration, carols whispering from the living room. Inside, every nerve in my body suddenly felt awake. Something was wrong. Not loudly wrong. Quietly wrong. Carefully wrong. I lifted the cup closer. The tea shimmered. My hand trembled just a little and Karen leaned forward. "Careful, Mom," she whispered. "It's hot." She sounded almost eager. I smiled the way mothers do when they do not want to start a war in front of the grandchildren. I brought the cup to my lips, let the steam fog my glasses and then very gently pretended to sip. I tilted it just enough so it looked right. Let a single drop touch my tongue. Bitter. Wrong. Not my chamomile. My heart did something strange in my chest. Not fear exactly, more like recognition. I set the cup down slowly. "Thank you, sweetheart," I said. "You always take such good care of me." She relaxed just a fraction. Richard finally looked up. Tyler swallowed hard, his eyes locking with mine for a brief second. There was something in that boy's gaze. Something like a warning or an apology. I dabbed my lips with a napkin, as if savoring the taste. And in that quiet, ordinary moment, surrounded by tinsel and family and holiday music, I realized I might be holding my own death in a Christmas mug. I did not drink the tea that morning, but that was only the first decision that changed everything. You do not wake up one day and decide, "My child is capable of hurting me." No, my dear. Distress grows the way winter frost creeps over a window, slowly, silently, until one day you notice you can no longer see clearly through the glass. When Karen was little, she used to grip my hand so tightly in crowded places that my fingers would go numb. She was a shy girl then, all big eyes and tangled hair, hiding behind my skirt. I was her protector, her soft place to land. If someone spoke too sharply to her, she would crawl into my lap and cry, "Mom, you are the only one who understands me." I believed that for a long time. Then life did what life does. Harold, my husband, her father, died too early, a quiet heart that simply decided to stop. Grief changed the shape of our home. The laughter faded. The house grew wider, emptier. Karen left for college and then for a city job and then for a man whose shoes were always too shiny and whose smile never quite reached his eyes. She came back to me in small emergencies. "Mom, I'm a little short this month." "Mom, the car needs a repair." "Mom, daycare is so expensive." I helped. Of course I helped. That is what mothers do. We pour from cups that are already half empty and tell ourselves it is love. First it was harmless. A few hundred here, a few hundred there. Then the requests grew teeth. "Mom, could you co-sign this?" "Mom, just sign these forms. It's just hospital policy." The papers became thicker, the explanations thinner. I still signed, even when my stomach knotted, even when I felt that tiny whisper inside saying, "Ask more questions." But love is a stubborn thing. It can make a clever woman foolish. The first real crack came last Easter, when she slid a folder across my table with that same eager, helpful smile. "Just some updated insurance papers, Mom. You know how hospitals are now. I already filled everything out for you." I remember the weight of the pen in my hand, the faint scent of her perfume, the way she tapped the line where my name should go. I signed. It would be months before I learned what I had actually given away that day. Months before I understood that the daughter who once hid behind my skirt now stood between me and my own life, measuring what I was worth on paper. And on Christmas morning, all of that history sat between us, invisible but heavy, as that untouched cup of tea cooled beside my hand. I thought the worst she wanted from me was my money, until I realized she might have wanted my absence instead. "Mom, you did not drink your tea," Karen said. Later, her voice light, but her eyes narrowing as we sat at the dinner table. "Turkey, mashed potatoes, cranberry sauce from a can the way Harold used to like it." Tyler had set the table with mismatched napkins, and the fairy lights flickered along the window. It should have been a normal Christmas, messy, loud, imperfect. Instead, the air felt tight, as if the whole house were holding its breath. "Oh, I'll have it after," I replied, waving my hand. "I'm full of water already." Old bladders are not as cooperative as they used to be. I chuckled, making a joke of my age. I have learned that sometimes you must turn your own bones into the punchline if you want people to stop looking too closely. Tyler's fork paused halfway to his mouth. Karen smiled, but the curve of it was tense. "You always drink it before eating, Mom. It helps your digestion, remember?" It was such a small thing, that sentence. But it landed wrong. My daughter is not the kind of woman who remembers my routines unless they affect her. Richard cleared his throat. "Let it cool, Karen. Tea is not going anywhere." The way he said it made me think he wished the whole situation would just disappear, tea and all. We passed dishes around. Karen kept glancing at my untouched mug on the sideboard. I could feel her attention like a hand pressing against the back of my neck. "So, Mom," she began, stabbing at her potatoes, "did you get a chance to look at those bank forms I sent you last month?" My chest tightened. "Not yet," I said. "I prefer to handle that sort of thing in person. I'll go to the branch after the holidays." She laughed too quickly. "You know you can do everything online now. It's easier for everyone." "For some of us," I replied softly. "But I like to see who is touching my money." Tyler looked between us, a flicker of something like guilt crossing his face. Later, when everyone moved to the living room to open presents, I doubled back to the kitchen. I took the mug, cooled now, and lifted it again. That strange bitterness brushed my tongue even from the rim. My hands were not as steady as they used to be, but I poured the tea down the sink, watching the pale liquid swirl into the drain. Then, on instinct I could not yet explain, I filled the cup with plain water and returned to the living room holding it as if nothing had changed. I caught Tyler's eye as I sat. He was watching the mug, not me. "Drink your tea, Mom," Karen said. I took a slow, deliberate sip of the water and smiled. I said. "Perfect." Tyler's shoulders slumped in visible relief. And that was the moment I realized I was not the only one in that house who knew something was terribly, terribly wrong. I did not know it then, but my grandson was keeping a secret that would shatter everything I thought I knew about my daughter. That night, when the house was quiet again and the Christmas lights blinked lazily across the street, I sat alone at my kitchen table with a glass of plain water. The mug from Karen sat in the sink, rinsed, but I swear I could still smell that bitter edge, like medicine that had no business in my cup. I could not sleep. Old women do not sleep well on the best of nights, and this was not one of them. At around 2 in the morning, when the neighborhood was nothing but shadows and the hum of distant heaters, I got up and walked down the hall to the spare bedroom. Harold used to call it my worry box, the place where I kept all our important papers. I opened the filing cabinet. Folders lined up like quiet soldiers. Birth certificates, tax returns, mortgage papers from a life already paid for and lived. And then near the back, the folder Karen had brought me last Easter. "Just some updated paperwork for your insurance, Mom." I pulled it out and laid everything on the bed. "You must understand something about me. I am not a lawyer and I am not stupid. Those two things can coexist." I put on my reading glasses, sat on the edge of the bed and read every line. The words swam at first. So many clauses and terms. But then certain phrases rose to the surface like bones in muddy water. Power of attorney. Full authority to act on behalf of. Medical decisions, financial transactions, property. My name. My signature. My daughter's name listed as the one who could speak for me when I supposedly could not speak for myself. I remembered the way she had pressed me that day. "It's just a formality, Mom. The hospital requires it now. In case of emergencies." For a long moment I sat very still. The house creaked around me, settling into the cold. Somewhere in the distance a car door slammed. Life went on as if nothing had changed. But something had. I realized then that she already had the legal power to move my money, to sign my name, to decide what pills I swallowed and what treatments I received if I were too confused or too weak to decide. And earlier that very morning she had watched me, breath held, while I held a cup of something that did not taste like chamomile. I gathered the papers back into the folder with hands that shook, not from age this time but from anger. I had given her the pen, but maybe, just maybe, it was not too late to take it back. The next day I walked into a lawyer's office with that folder in my bag, and a feeling in my chest that my own child had become dangerous. The lawyer's office smelled faintly of coffee and printer ink, and the receptionist called me ma'am in that careful way young people use when they are not sure if you are fragile or fierce. "Do you have an appointment?" she asked. "No," I said. "But I have a problem." She must have seen something in my face, because 10 minutes later I was sitting in a small office across from a man with kind eyes and a tie that did not quite match his shirt. His name was Daniel. "What can I do for you, Mrs. Patterson?" I said. "And you can start by telling me exactly what kind of rope I let my daughter wrap around my neck." His eyebrows lifted slightly, but he did not laugh. "All right," he said. "Let us take a look." I slid the folder across his desk. He read in silence. The only sound was the ticking of a small clock on the wall, and the faint scratch of his pen as he underlined certain lines. I watched his face instead of the documents, the tiny tightening of his jaw, the way his mouth pressed into a thin line at page 3. After a while he set the papers down and looked at me with a gentleness that made me want to both thank him and slap someone else. "Mrs. Patterson," he said slowly, "your daughter has been granted very broad powers, financially, medically, legally. If someone at a hospital or a bank were to receive these documents, they would most likely listen to her before they listen to you. Even if I am standing right in front of them?" I asked. He hesitated. That was answer enough. I nodded once. "Can I undo it?" "Yes," he said. "You are competent. You are here. We can revoke this power of attorney and create new instructions that protect you. But I need to ask, why now? Did something happen?" I thought of the tea, of Karen's two bright eyes, of the way Tyler had watched me, holding his breath. "Let's just say," I replied, "I no longer trust my daughter with my life, and I am beginning to suspect I should not trust her with my death either." He did not push. Instead, he started explaining my options, the way a good teacher explains a difficult lesson. We drafted new documents, revocation of the old power of attorney, a new will that put things in clear, simple terms, and explicit instructions that no medical decision about me be made without my own voice, as long as I could speak. "Do you have anyone else you trust?" he asked. "Another family member?" A face flashed in my mind. Tyler, eyes wide, shoulders hunched, watching that mug. "Yes," I said. "My grandson. He still tells the truth, even when it hurts." "We can include him," Daniel replied. By the time I left, my hand ached from signing. But for the first time in months the ache felt like something I had chosen. I stepped out into the pale winter sun clutching a new folder. The snow on the sidewalk was slushy now, melting at the edges. The world felt just a little less slippery under my feet. I thought fixing the papers would be enough, until I saw what my daughter had already done with my money. When you live alone, your house becomes a living record of you. My cupboards know which side I favor when I lift heavy pots. My floorboards can tell you where I pace when I think. And my old household ledger, well, that little notebook can tell you exactly how generous I have been and how foolish. I sat at my kitchen table with Daniel's new documents neatly stacked beside me, and pulled out the ledger I had kept since my first year of marriage. Not out of obsession, no. Out of habit. Out of respect for the life Harold and I built penny by penny. I flipped through the pages of the last 2 years. $3,000 for Karen's car repair. $800 for Richard's business idea. $1,500 for their kitchen renovation, because the old countertops were embarrassing when guests came over. Each line was a small story. An emergency, a favor, a promise to pay you back soon, Mom, we swear. I traced the numbers with my finger, feeling something shift in my chest. It was not the money itself that hurt. It was the pattern. the taking. The expectation that I would always be there to soften their falls while my own future quietly thinned. I called the bank the next morning. The woman on the other end was polite, but there was a tiny catch in her voice when I asked about recurring transfers. "Yes, Mrs. Patterson," she said. "You have a scheduled monthly transfer of $750 to your daughter. It has been active for about a year and a half now." My grip on the phone tightened. "A what?" "A transfer. It was set up last August. Under your authority, of course. We have the documentation here." "I never set that up," I said. My voice came out calm even. The way it does when a mother knows if she lets herself scream, the whole house will crumble. "According to our records," the woman said carefully, "it was arranged under the power of attorney we have on file. The old document. The one I had just revoked." I closed my eyes. "Cancel it," I told her. "Immediately. And please make a note that any future changes to my accounts must be done by me in person. No phone calls. No paperwork delivered by anyone else. Only me." She hesitated, then said gently, "Of course, Mrs. Patterson. I'll flag your account." Later, I went into the branch in person. The young manager printed out 18 months of statements for me. I took them home, laid them across the kitchen table like cards in a game I finally understood, and began circling things that did not belong. Unfamiliar withdrawals. Furniture I never bought. Medical supplies I never received. A large emergency withdrawal I had never made. My daughter had not just planned for the future. She had already been quietly emptying my present. I sat back, the papers rustling under my elbows, and let the truth settle. She did not see me as her mother anymore. She saw me as an account to be managed, or closed. I knew then that I had to confront her, but I did not expect the first crack in the lie to come from Tyler. Tyler knocked on my door 2 days later. Shoulders hunched inside his jacket, hat pulled low. It was still winter break, but he looked like someone who had not slept much since Christmas. "Hey, Grandma," he said, forcing a smile. "Got any of those oatmeal cookies left?" "Always," I replied. "A house is not a home without at least one tin of cookies nobody asked for." He laughed softly and followed me into the kitchen. While I fussed with the cookie tin, I watched him. There was a heaviness in the way he moved, a carefulness that did not belong on a boy his age. "You can sit, you know," I told him. "The chairs are not going to run away." He pulled out a chair and sat, hands folded, eyes on the table. We chatted about his classes, the awful cafeteria food, the girl in his dorm who played the ukulele at midnight. It was pleasant but thin, like we were both walking on ice. Finally, I set the cookies down and leaned my elbows on the table. "All right, Tyler," I said. "Why are you really here?" He swallowed, looked at me, looked away. His voice, when it came, was small. "Mom says you're mad at her," he murmured. "She says you've been acting paranoid. That you're cutting us off." "Is that what she told you?" I asked. He nodded, eyes fixed on his hands. "She says you think she's trying to steal from you, or hurt you. She says you're losing it." Those words should have pierced me. Instead, they landed on a heart already armored by truth. "And what do you think?" I asked quietly. He hesitated for a long time. I sat still, giving him room. "I think," he finally whispered, "that you did not drink that tea on Christmas. And I think you were right not to." The room seemed to tilt just slightly. I kept my voice even. "Why do you think that, Tyler?" He stared at the table. "Because Mom and Dad were talking in the kitchen before you came over. They did not know I was in the hallway. I heard them arguing. Mom said something about not messing it up this time, and making sure the cups don't get switched again." My skin went cold. "Again," I repeated. My voice sounded far away, even to me. He nodded. And then she said, "If this does not work, we'll have to wait until she gets worse. People will believe us if she's confused." Dad told her to calm down, that they could not rush it or they'd get caught. He finally looked up, and in his eyes I saw shame, though none of this belonged to him. "I did not understand all of it," he said, "but I understood enough. So when I saw you not drink it, I was relieved." I took his hand across the table. His fingers were cold. He had his grandfather's hands. "Tyler," I said softly, "thank you for telling me." Tears shimmered in his eyes. What are you going to do, Grandma? I thought of the papers I had already changed, the money I had already protected, the life I still intended to live. I am going to do what your great-grandmother taught me, I said. I am going to believe what people show me, not what they say. What Tyler did not know was that he had just given me the last piece I needed, to not only protect myself but to hold his parents accountable. A few days after that conversation, Tyler came by again. This time he was jittery, eyes darting to the door as if expecting his parents to burst in behind him. "Close the door, Grandma," he said. "Please." I did as he asked. He pulled his phone from his pocket, hands trembling. "I need to show you something," he whispered. He opened an audio file and set the phone on the table between us. The timestamp said it was recorded late on Christmas night, after I had gone home. For a moment there was only background noise. Dishes clinking, the TV murmuring in another room. Then Karen's voice, sharp and brittle, cut through. "She wasn't supposed to switch the cups, Richard. We were so close." My breath caught. Richard's voice came next, low and irritated. "Lower your voice. Tyler's upstairs. Do you understand what this means?" Karen hissed. "We planned this for weeks. I talked to the doctor. I got the dosage right. You had one job. You're the one who panicked when she put the mug down," he muttered. "What did you expect me to do? Force it down her throat?" Silence. Then a strangled sound, my daughter's. Half laugh, half sob. "She's old," she said. It's not like anyone would be surprised. A little confusion, a fall down the stairs, a heart that just stops. "We are her family. They would believe us." "So we wait," Richard replied. "We find another way. She already signed everything. Her accounts, the house, the medical forms. We don't need to rush." The recording clicked off. The silence that followed was louder than any scream. I realized I was clutching the edge of the table so hard my knuckles were white. Tyler watched me, eyes wide and wet. "I recorded it from my room vent," he said, voice shaking. "They were right under my floor. I did not know what to do with it. I kept thinking they'd change their minds, that they'd realize how wrong it was. But they didn't. They started talking about you like you were already gone." He put his head in his hands. "I'm sorry I didn't show you sooner." I reached across the table and gently pulled his hands away from his face. "Look at me, Tyler," I said. He did. "You are the only person in this mess who has done the right thing," I told him. "The only one. You did not fail me. You saved me." He let out a broken breath. "What are you going to do now?" he asked. I leaned back, feeling something harden inside me. The part of me that had always made excuses for my daughter finally, mercifully, stepped aside. "Now," I said quietly, "I am going to stop pretending this is just a misunderstanding. I am going to protect myself. And I am going to make sure they never get the chance to do this to anyone else." The grandmother who baked cookies and knitted scarves was still there. But beside her now stood another woman, the one who had held her husband's hand in hospital corridors, signed mortgage papers, buried friends, and learned over and over how to stand back up when life knocked her down. That woman was tired. She was also done being soft where it mattered most. I thought the hardest part would be facing my daughter, but the real test came when the state knocked on my door instead. It was almost comical in a dark way, when the doorbell rang 2 weeks later and I opened it to find a young woman with a clipboard on my porch. "Mrs. Patterson?" she asked. "My name is Sarah Chen. I'm from Adult Protective Services. We received a report of possible self-neglect and financial confusion. I'm here to conduct a wellness check." I almost laughed in her face. "Almost. Let me guess," I said. "The report came from my very concerned daughter in Arizona?" She blinked, professional mask flickering. "I'm not at liberty to discuss the source of the report, ma'am. But I do need to ask you a few questions." "Of course," I replied. "Come in. I'll make some tea. And before you worry, this batch is entirely under my control." We sat in the living room, the same room where Harold had fallen asleep in front of the TV 1,000 times, the same room where Karen had once unwrapped a dollhouse and screamed with delight. I poured tea for both of us, from a box I had bought myself, from a kettle I had filled and watched boil. No one touched my cup but me. Sarah asked about my daily routine, my medications, whether I knew what day it was, whether I had any difficulty remembering to pay bills. I answered every question clearly, calmly, with dates and details. I even pulled out my ledger and showed her the neat rows of expenses. Then I handed her 2 folders, one from Daniel, my lawyer, and one from the bank. "This," I said, tapping the first folder, "is the documentation revoking my daughter's power of attorney and updating my will. And this," I added, tapping the second, "is evidence of unauthorized transfers and withdrawals made under that old document." She took her time reading. The longer she read, the deeper the line between her eyebrows grew. "Mrs. Patterson," she said finally, "do you understand what your daughter and son-in-law attempted to do?" "Oh, I understand," I replied. "They tried to treat me like a problem to be solved. Cleanly, quietly, with paperwork and pills instead of fists. It is tidier, you see, to let an old woman slip away than to face the mess of saying no to her while she is still standing." Sarah's eyes softened. "Do you feel safe here?" I looked around my little house, at the photographs on the mantel, at the Afghan draped over the couch, at the mug of tea I had poured with my own 2 hands. "Yes," I said. "For the first time in a long while I do." She left with copies of the documents and a promise to file a report. As I watched her walk down the path, I realized something. My daughter had tried to use the system to declare me incompetent. Instead, she had handed me the very tools I needed to prove how capable I truly was. But even after the state believed me, there was still one confrontation left. One final conversation where I had to choose between being a mother and being my own savior. The last time I spoke to Karen, the call came late in the evening. I had just finished washing the dinner dishes when my phone buzzed on the counter. "Mom," she said as soon as I answered. "No, hello. No, how are you?" "Yes," I replied. "I wondered when you'd call." Her voice was strained, brittle. "I heard you talked to some lawyer, and the bank, and now some social worker is sniffing around. What are you doing?" "Protecting myself," I said simply. "From your own family?" she snapped. I took a slow breath. "From anyone who thinks my life and my money are theirs to manage. Family or not." There was a heavy silence. Then she laughed. A sharp, humorless sound. "You've always been dramatic," she said. "Tyler told you something, didn't he? That ungrateful little." "Careful," I cut in. My voice came out calm but firm. "Whatever else you have done, you will not drag that boy down with you. He is the only one in this that still knows the difference between right and wrong." "You're turning him against me," she accused. "No," I replied softly. "You did that yourself." I told her about the revoked documents, the canceled transfers, the report filed with Adult Protective Services, the possibility, just a possibility I emphasized, that the recording Tyler had made might one day find its way to the right ears if she kept pushing. "Are you threatening me?" she whispered. "No," I said. "I am setting a boundary. There's a difference. A threat says, if you hurt me, I will destroy you. A boundary says, if you hurt me, you will no longer have access to me." She scoffed. "You're an old woman, Mom. You need us." "I needed you," I corrected, "to love me, not to manage my death." There was a tiny sound then, a hitch in her breath. For a moment, I heard not the calculating woman who had studied my signature, but the little girl who used to sob into my shoulder after bad dreams. "Do you have any idea how hard it's been?" she burst out. "Raising Tyler, dealing with bills, watching you live alone in that house while we drown? You could have made things easier." "I tried," I said quietly. "Every check I wrote, every favor, every signature. But somewhere along the way, helping you became the same thing as erasing myself. And that, Karen, that I will not do." "So what now?" she asked, voice flat. "Now," I said, "we stop pretending. You will not call my doctors. You will not touch my accounts. You will not step into this house unless you come with nothing in your hands but the truth." "And if I don't?" she challenged. "Then you will be my daughter in biology only," I replied. "A chapter in my life, not the whole story." She did not answer. The line crackled softly. "Take care of yourself," I said at last. "I hope someday you remember who you were before you started counting other people's money as your own." I hung up. My hand shook afterward, not from fear, but from the weight of what I had finally allowed myself to do. choose my own life over my role as someone's mother. Cutting her off should have left me empty. But instead, it opened space for something unexpected to grow. You might think that losing a child by choice, not by death, would hollow a woman out. And it does, in a way. There is a particular ache reserved for mothers whose children walk away while still breathing. But something else happened too. My days became quiet in a different way. Not the silence of waiting for a phone call that never comes, but the peace of knowing that the call, if it came, would not decide whether I lived or died. I joined a book club at the library. A silly little Tuesday group filled with women who argued passionately about fictional characters and shared recipes between chapters. I started walking every morning just around the block at first, then a little farther as my knees allowed. The world did not shrink after I said no to my daughter. It widened. Tyler came by every weekend he could. He helped me fix a broken step on the porch, set up online banking alerts which I insist on checking myself, and programmed my phone so that unknown numbers go straight to voicemail. Once, while we were having coffee at the kitchen table, he looked up and said, "Grandma, I keep thinking. Maybe if I'd said something earlier. Maybe if I'd stopped them." I reached across and put my hand over his. "Stop," I told him gently. "This is not your sin to carry. You were a child pulled into an adult's darkness. You stepped toward the light when it mattered. That is more than most grown people manage." He blinked rapidly, then nodded. "I don't understand, Mom, sometimes," he admitted. "Neither do I said. "But I understand this, you are not her. You get to choose who you become." We celebrated my 70th birthday in the backyard with a small group of neighbors and friends. There was cake with too much frosting, and someone brought a bottle of cheap champagne that made us all laugh when the cork shot into the hedge. Tyler handed me a wrapped package, cheeks pink. "It's nothing big," he said. "Just saw it and thought of you." Inside was a framed photograph, my wedding day restored and colorized. Harold and I, young and foolish and utterly certain the world would bend to our love. I had forgotten the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled. I hung that picture above the fireplace, where the light touched it every morning. That night, after everyone left, I sat alone in the living room, the house smelling of wax and sugar and old wood. I looked at Harold's face in the photograph, then at my own reflection in the glass. "I did it, you know," I whispered. "I chose to stay alive. In every way that matters." For the first time since that Christmas cup of tea, I let myself cry. Not from fear this time, but from a strange, tender kind of relief. And it was only then, years later, with my life firmly my own, that I could finally look back at that Christmas morning and understand the true lesson hidden in that untouched cup. Now, when I think about that Christmas morning, the tea I did not drink, the daughter who watched too closely, the grandson who held his breath, I do not think of it as the day my family broke. I think of it as the day I woke up. People imagine betrayal as a single dramatic moment. A shout. A slammed door. Confession. But the truth is, betrayal is usually quieter. It's a signature on a line you did not read carefully enough. A special cup of tea. That smells just a little bit off. A child who stops seeing you as a person and starts seeing you as a problem to solve. If I had drunk that tea, perhaps the world would have said it was just my time. An old woman, confused, heart giving out. My daughter would have cried in all the right places. People would have said how lucky she was to have been so involved in my care. Instead, I sit here now, an old woman who did not go quietly. Do not misunderstand me, I still miss the girl my daughter used to be. The one who fell asleep on my chest after thunderstorms. The one who called me from college just to hear my voice. But I refuse to pretend that longing for who she was obligates me to accept who she became. Love, I have learned, is not meant to be a weapon turned against you. And motherhood does not mean surrendering your right to live, think, and choose for yourself. Sometimes the bravest thing a parent can do is step back and say, "No more. If you must walk this dark road, you will walk it without my blessing, and without my blood on your hands." On quiet mornings now, I sit by the window with a cup of tea I brewed myself. I watch the light creep across the floor, touching the photograph above the fireplace, brushing against the worn arm of Harold's favorite chair. I think of Tyler calling every Sunday just to tell me about his week. I think of my small routines, my walks, my books, my garden. My life is not grand. It is not the kind of story that makes headlines. It is simply mine. That, in the end, is what that Christmas taught me. You are allowed to fight for your own life, even when the danger comes from the people you love most. Especially then. So when my granddaughter asked, Nanny, when did you stop trusting your own child? I smiled and took her small hand in mine. I did not stop trusting, little one, I said. I started listening. To my doubts. To the tremor in a voice. To the way a cup of tea can tell you more truth than 1,000 I love yous. And then I told her this story, not to frighten her but to arm her. Because somewhere out there, another old woman is being handed a special drink by someone she loves. And I pray she feels that same whisper in her bones that I did. The whisper that says, you are allowed to put the cup down. You are allowed to ask why. You are allowed to choose yourself. In the end, I did not save myself because I was clever or strong or fearless. I saved myself because I finally believed what the moment was telling me, more than I believed the people who wanted me quiet. And that, my dear, is the kind of wisdom it sometimes takes a whole lifetime and one untouched cup of tea to learn.